A bit scared of Steph, so I just wanted to concur with all the comments this morning. Really excited to be here in Melbourne. The experience we had in Penrith and Newcastle and the events that we ran around those games, which connected with the whole game, really helped us to kind of leverage the momentum that we want to achieve within women's football. So today I'm going to talk to you about the overall strategy that we're approaching the development of the women's game here in Australia. And it's really important because it isn't just about the Matildas or about the Grassroots or about the W League for football. It's about the whole, and it's about all of our stakeholders aligning towards one clear vision. Before I get into this, I just thought I'd tell you a bit about myself because I think it's important. I'm from England, which you can probably tell by my accent. Some people tend to say I sound a little bit Australian these days, so I've been here for 10 years. But I started out playing the game in London. My dad was a mad football fan. He was a supporter of a club called Millwall. So if there's any English fans in the room, you'll know what the reputation of Millwall is, and you'll know that you're not to ask me any curly questions later. So interesting, Millwall were very proactive in the women's space, but does anyone know which Socceroo played in an FA Cup final for Millwall a few years ago? Tim Cahill. So yeah, so he had an opportunity to play at Millwall, and I think we made him a better player. That's all I'm going to say. So, but went on to grow a passion for the game. Got injured when I was 17, like lots of girls do these days. It was an ACL, a pretty bad one, and started to get involved in administration and coaching. Back in the UK, got a passion for sport, studied in sport, and when I got out of uni, the only role I wanted was to work in football. So I worked in the north of England, promoting the game, developing leagues, setting up Centre of Excellence, and it was my dream job. And I found myself here in Australia about 10 years ago, and about 8 years ago, started working in at the FFA. I've seen a lot of change over those 8 years, some ups and downs, as football often demonstrates. Worked on a few interesting projects, rolled out my football club. So anyone that's used the system, if you've got any problems, don't blame me. Then went on to roll out another easy project, which was the National Premier Leagues. Again, if you've got issues with your age groups and the number of clubs in Victoria, then I'm not going to take responsibility for that. So. But I've been involved in the game, and then more recently I've taken on the portfolio of looking after community football, women's football, and the pathway here in Australia. So I love the game, and in particular, I have to say the area that I love working in most is the women's game, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about that today. So we have the ambition to become a leading organisation for females in sport. And there's kind of 4 key pillars that are focused on that. It's a strategic imperative for FFA, and we talk about that in terms of how we are leading the game, so the general representation within our game. It's embedded within the winning pillar of our strategy, it's embedded within the participation pillar, and it's also embedded within the fan pillar. But strategically, we made a decision not to call out women's football as separate to in our strategic plan or separate within our organisation. It's embedded in everything that we do. And that's really hard sometimes because that means we have to influence and be focused. There's a lot going on in football, but we feel it's the right approach. So I head up women's football at FFA, but I work with my colleagues on the senior management team. Mark Falvo is one of those individuals at the front who was instrumental in bringing Brazil here and China, and we work in partnership to really drive objectives across FFA. And it's really core to everything that we do within football. It's a whole of game effort, and Kemon highlighted this. It's about the A-League and W League teams across the game. It's about the member federations, which are core to growing Grassroots. And we're really starting to see a dedicated workforce for the women's game evolve, with more positions coming into place at a member federation level, more dedicated positions coming in at the W League level. And that's really important, so we start to create visibility, but more than anything, that we have boots on the ground that can start to educate and talk to people about women's football, and that's something that we'd like to grow going forward. There are 4 key priorities for women's football. The first one is participation, and Kim has already indicated that we want to get to 50-50, and we're very much behind that objectives. And I'll talk to you a bit about some of the things that we're doing in that space. But it's about how we inspire girls to play the game at the grassroots and continue to grow. We have 100,000 girls playing our game. When you split it up into various age groups, it's still not enough. We need to be striving to get to 50-50. We've got the Westfield W League, which is really kind of the backbone of connecting both the grassroots and the Matildas area of the game. And we're very much focused on developing a world-class women's league. It's an opportunity to showcase our Matildas on a week-to-week basis, and it provides a fantastic pathway for future Matildas and for women and girls that just want to inspire to play at the highest level. Then we've got the Mighty Matildas, which are really important, and I think that talking to my colleagues across other sports, which I do often because a lot of us that are working in this women's sports space, we want the tide to rise for everyone. When AFL hit a certain target within the women's AFL, we're all competitive. Administrators are probably as competitive as football players, so we want to strive to be better. So isn't it fantastic now that finally there's competition within women's sport? I think that's great, and that's actually making us all strive to be better. And I think what it's also starting to create is some competitive tension within that broadcast space. So a few years ago, for example, when we played over in Osaka to qualify for the Olympics, we were able to talk to Channel 7 about broadcasting those games, and they were particularly interested because the women's BBL had just been launched and they had fantastic numbers on 10, and therefore there was an interest to kind of try and beat that with the Matildas. So for us, it's actually important, and it's part of that whole structure. And lastly, part of our strategy is actually trying to build a legacy for the Women's World Cup bid. So female participation. We have 250,000 girls playing our game in structured football. We've got 531 female competitions, around 3,935 female football teams nationally. So that's kind of where we are now, but we want to be bigger. And what does the research tell us? This was really important that we actually spoke to females to start to understand why would they want to be connected to our game, and when they do connect to our game at the grassroots, what are the key things that are important to them? So some of the insights we found was that for lots of girls there's a real lack of awareness of the opportunities that exist. Girls start playing later, so on average girls are playing at 7, whereas our boys are starting at 4 and 5. So we have to start to break down that barrier. A lot of girls are playing in the school environment, but not necessarily transferring into the club environment. It's important to understand the journey that girls take to actually connect in with sports, and a family friend or friends, and a family connection is really important for girls. And that social interaction is critical as part of that as well. That's another important one. The young girls, if they don't know anyone that's actually part of the club, then that's a barrier for them to make that first step. So, and the emphasis on fun is important. And one of the key things that came out from the research that we did was that a lot of girls like to try a sport before they jump in. So the kind of concept of creating like a taster for the sport, which is what we've tried to develop for the Mini Roy's Kickoff program. Lots of girls might want to try with their friends, see whether they like it before they actually jump in to connect to the club. One of the big things that is really important in this space, and I agree with Kim on, that clubs are at the heart of particularly grassroots development. We have to start to create safe and friendly environments for girls. So that's about cultural awareness. That's about making sure that every girl that turns up to a club is treated exactly the same as a boy. And right now, I'd say that that's not necessarily the case. If we want to get to 50-50, we have to create environments where girls are as welcome as boys, that girls get equal access to facilities as boys, that girls get the best coaches as the boys, not playing on a Sunday night or late on a Friday night because that's the only time that we can fit the girls in. That's the kind of mindset change that needs to happen. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, because that doesn't cost money. That just is about the way that we approach the development of the girls' game and the boys' game. And that's something that I think we can work together on. Starting at 4 to 11, and from a national perspective, we have to prioritise, and we think it's important that we actually start at that early age group. If we can get the experience right between 4 and 11, then we can start to retain girls to either reach their potential within our sport or take on broader roles within the sport. So part of that is introducing an introductory program for girls. So this is the kind of concept behind the Mini Roos Kickoff program. We've had a lot of success here in Victoria, but it can get bigger. And I hope with your help that you can help us to grow this space, because the research is telling us that girls really are interested to play football, but they'd like a different type of experience before they jump full in. The other key thing that we've started to develop is a focus on female-only leagues. So we think it's important that we give girls choice at the grassroots. So some girls might like to play with boys, some girls may choose to play with girls. But right now, when a girl rocks up to your club, what options does she have? So I think it's important that as we start to grow the girls' game, that we think about the different options that we create, and we think about the different motivations that girls have to play football. So that's something that we're really focused on, and that's something that we'll be working closely with FFV to start to roll out, in particular, female-only leagues where girls can play with girls and they have the choice to continue as part of a broader league. We have developed some tools around getting more girls involved. You may have seen the Women's Football Guide, which is a kind of toolkit which can help in this space. But facility investment is critical to this. And I say this respectfully, that female change rooms are important, but they're not the whole picture when it comes to trying to get more girls playing our game. When I worked in England, we have a very specific growth and facility strategy that was focused on more lights, more synthetic pitches, and upgrading change rooms. I have to say the change rooms was the third priority. If you want to get more girls playing, particularly at the younger age groups, then lights and synthetic, where you can get more usage, was more of our priority, particularly in England. And that's something that we've started to talk to governments about, and it's something that I feel quite passionate about. There's a difference between someone having a good experience versus trying to get more girls playing the game. As I said, more pitches, more artificial, more lights, and is critical. And on occasions, football clubs are turning players away due to capacity issues. So we have to think about when we develop a growth strategy to get more girls playing in Victoria, that we're not just focused on the same clubs, and that we actually work in partnership to grow the girls' game. A key part of it is creating visibility as well, and one of the key initiatives that we have in this space is Female Football Week, which is based around the International Women's Day. This is actually a fantastic initiative that grew out of the Grassroots, where member federations were starting to create more visibility for women and girls around this time of the year, and FFA, working with the member federations, decided that we should actually start to have a real focus. And this is about creating visibility for all roles in the game, but with a specific priority on trying to get more girls playing and building that awareness. So it was launched in 2016. It's based around International Women's Day. It includes community activations, but last year was the first year that we linked in with the A-League and the W League, which was important. And we also have a new commercial partner on board, which is Rebel, which are now a supporting partner of the W League as well. So they've got that full integration where we can start to promote opportunities for all girls in the game. The National Premier Leagues is a critical part of the pathway that sits obviously above that participation space. This is an initiative that's been around for 4 years in the men's game, and the similar approach we're taking to the women's game. So it's delivered by member federations. We are rolling this out nationally. I have to say Victoria has probably the most progressive NPL that I've seen across Australia, and that's due to the efforts of the FFV board and the football community. It's not perfect, but it's heading in the right direction. I've seen some huge strides in that space, but it's a really tough area because it's about getting better coaches, better facilities, and those are real complex issues. But I think that our goal is to make sure that we have strong women's NPLs all over Australia and that we have clear pathways. We're not there yet, but I think we've made some huge strides in that space. Interestingly as well, this is where a lot of our W League players, young Matildas, under 17s, national team players are also playing as well. So the environments need to improve. So although we've made some key strides, we need to get to a point where we've got professional environments across Australia within that NPL, particularly where we have some of our best players currently situated. The Westfield W League, we're on a mission to ensure that the W League becomes fully professional. We're in our 10th season, something that personally as a female, I'm really proud that we launched our W League 10 seasons ago. We launched it when it wasn't easy. It wasn't the sexy thing to do. We launched it when we'd only just launched the A-League, so we're growing the A-League and the W League at the same time. That has posed some really interesting challenges in A-League clubs, which are really just trying to grow their own development of their club at the same time. So it's quite a different journey that we're on in comparison to other sports that might have well-established professional men's teams. But it was the right thing to do, and when you look at these players behind, the W League played a massive part in the success of what we're achieving with the Matildas today. We have 9 teams in the W League. 17% of the players come from internationally. Got Natasha Dowie in the room, who's one of those fellow English person who's played in the W for a few seasons now. Over 400 fans have attended matches over the last 9 seasons. 90% of our Westfield players play in the W League, so unlike the Socceroos, where a lot of players are playing internationally, and all of that might change from year to year, consistently we have the best Matildas coming back to Australia to play in the W League, so you can actually create that connection with the grassroots right through to the Matildas. And Sam Kerr's doing a fantastic job of really raising the profile of Perth Glory within Perth. When Sam went back to Perth, she was the most well-known player, male or female, and the club are actually starting to leverage that. She's transitioned into a space now which isn't just about what Sam can do to promote the women's game, it's about what Sam can do to promote the game, and she actually embraces that. So that's a really good example of the movement and the way that the game is actually changing around us just within the last few months. This year, we boast 27 matches which will be broadcast. We've got a new partnership with SBS. That's really important for all women's leagues, that you have a strong broadcast base. We're very focused on trying to grow the commercial revenue within the women's game. In order to do that, you need more content, you need more reach. That's why broadcast is critical. Women's sport generally is in a space at the moment where there's greater broadcast partnerships which are being created, but we've not necessarily transitioned into a space yet where there's a value attached to that broadcast. And that's certainly the next evolution for us. For example, for the last 3 seasons previously, we were contributing towards production to ensure that the W League was broadcast. That was an important investment that FFA was making. We've now transitioned into a space where we're not necessarily paying for the broadcast, but the next evolution needs to be that we actually start to put a value on women's sport, and that's something that we'll be focused on. 7.4 million have watched on Fox Sports and ABC over the last few seasons. And we've had representation from players from all over the world, particularly from the US, England, New Zealand, Nigeria, Brazil, Denmark. So this is really becoming a world-class league. And players previously wanted to come to Australia because it was a nice trip. Perhaps I could play a bit of football and play in the W League. That's actually starting to change, and the reputation of the W League is increasing. One of the key things that we did this year, which was kind of part of our evolution of striving towards gender equality, that when we launched our You've Got to Have a Team campaign, it had both male players and female players stood side by side. And that was really important. And as I said, so back in Perth, Sam can probably help grow the fan base of Perth Glory as much as a male player within that environment. So that was a big strategic step that we took within this year, and that's something that's important. The core to what we're trying to achieve with the A-League and the W League is that it's one club, and we really want our A-League clubs and W League clubs to promote their whole club, to connect with the whole community. We want them to connect with a diverse gender. We want them to grow their female fan base, and W League plays a critical role within that. To Kim On's point, we also worked closely with the PFA recently around a landmark pay deal within the W League. This was about ensuring that we had the right pay and conditions. We'd have been, I suppose, out of 10 seasons of having kind of a salary cap approach, and we felt it was important to actually draw a line in the sand and say that every player that was playing in the league, was training in the league, should get remunerated, and that was the step that we made this year. But the game is changing, so our top female players now will be on around 130k, could be on slightly more. When you look at the centralised payment they get around the Matildas, W League, and also international commitments as well. In our W League, our top players are earning around 26,000. We've got a salary cap now of 300,000. There's a minimum of 10k for each player, and the average salary is around 15k. So that's a massive step forward that we made this year. And I have to say, the best thing about the CBA was that it didn't actually play out in the media. I think it was one of the few CBAs that didn't do that recently. And that was because we took a real partnership approach. From an FFA perspective, we wanted to do what was in the best interest of the players. The PFA had the players at the centre, and the clubs did too. And the result was a great outcome for the game. But I will say it's the start of the journey, not the end, because we should be striving towards full gender pay equity in that space. And you will note that recently David Gallop acknowledged that FFA supports that as part of our Male Champions of Change commitment. We also introduced the formal maternity policy, enhanced medical conditions, insurance, and it's focused on a specific set season around 23 weeks. And a 6-week pre-season as well was a big part of that. However, that's just the beginning of what we want to achieve with the W League. So we need to stay focused on continuing to improve the play and conditions around the W League. We need to get to full home and away. I've got Ray in the room. I've had many conversations with Ray about that. If Heather Reid was in the room, she would also be talking about that too. So it's very important that we get to full home and away. We want to strive for 10 teams, but it has to be the right 10 teams. So we have to be strategic about where the next team should come from, and not just how that helps the club, but also how a 10th team can help us to grow the W League. We want every game broadcast. We want a strong integration with the HOW clubs as well. And finally, one of the biggest things, and something that as a female I'm really focused on in terms of my role within football, is we need to be focused on ensuring that we have a quality product. If we're going to have a sustainable league where we're going to grow a fan base and build commercial revenue, the product has to speak for itself. And I think that what we're actually offering within the W League in terms of the quality of football is fantastic. And it's only improving season on season, and that's something that we need to continue to be focused on, because that will ensure that we get sustainability within the W League long term. The Westfield Matildas have been amazing, I have to say. I feel very privileged to work with this group of players, not just because of the success, but if you actually have an opportunity to talk to them individually, they really understand their role in helping to grow the game, and they really understand their role in terms of the role that they're playing in helping to take us on this journey of gender equality. And that's something that I think is great, and something that I'm really proud to be connected to the Matildas. In terms of where we are now, I think that's gone to 6, but we were at 5th. We have a collective bargain agreement with the Matildas. We've got lots of Matildas now that are starting to play internationally. Germany, China, Japan, Norway, South Korea. We've always had a lot of players playing in the US. And obviously we had the fantastic sellout at Penrith. and Newcastle. And I'd like to encourage everyone in the room to at least tweet about getting more people to the game tonight, because I'd love to see Melbourne smash the Penrith target, and I'm sure that our friends from the Victorian government in the room would love to see that as well, just so we can get one up on the New South Wales government. But it is really important. I'm really passionate about this. This can't be a flash in the pan. We need to continue the momentum. So we need to take the Matildas seriously as a commercial product, which means that we need to value the fan base, and we need to have ambitions to continue to get more people to games. It's not just about hosting the games anymore. It's about taking it seriously, like we do with the Socceroos, being happy if we get a certain crowd and being disappointed if we get a lower crowd. And that's something that I'm certainly pushing nationally, and I hope that Victoria delivers tonight. I'm sure it will. The Kerr effect. I think we're pretty lucky to have a player like Sam Kerr. The flips certainly add an added interest to the Matildas. But Sam Kerr had a fantastic season over in the US. Best player, top goal scorer. She's obviously flipping all over the place at the moment. We have to be careful though, because she's got bad knees, so we need to make sure that there's not too many flips. She says that I asked her recently, what does she rank herself out of 10 when she does a flip at a game? She said, yeah, she ranked herself 10 out of 10 over in the US, but only a 7 in Newcastle. So I said, well, I hope you'll get a 10 out of 10 in Victoria. So she's been working on that in training, so look out tonight. But one of the key ingredients to what we're trying to do with the Matildas, which I think is a bit different to what's happening in other areas at the moment, is we have a really strong focus on fan engagement. The Matildas at the Penrith and the Newcastle games stayed for at least an hour and a half after the game, signing autograph, connecting with boys and girls. And all the research that we've done around girls and fans and connecting with the game is some girls might come to a game, not necessarily be interested in the score, but be really excited at the end of the game because they're going to get something signed by Sam Kerr. That is why it's important, and the Matildas understand that, and that's something that we're really continuing to develop. The other key thing is that they're accessible. So after the game, fans can connect with our female players, and that's something that's important as well. I'd like to add that it's not just girls, but we're starting to see with the Matildas this kind of boys and girls connection, so which I think is fantastic. So it's built on a community engagement model. Around every home game, we do school visits, club engagement, open training sessions, and signing sessions. In terms of what's next for the Matildas, we'd like to see them at minimum get to the semi-final within France, but I think if we get everything right, then we should be pushing to win the World Cup, and certainly that's something that Stadge will be pushing for too. We need a consistent 12-month program with quality opponents. So it's really tough with the women's calendar. Unlike the men's calendar, a lot of the tournaments are like one-off tournaments that are played in Asia, whereas for the men's calendar, you get home and away fixtures, which enable us to get more content for the Socceroos back here in Australia. In Europe, for example, they have a lot more home and away fixtures within their qualifications for World Cups and Olympics, but that's not something that we have within Asia, which means that each member association, like FFA, has to develop that content and work in partnerships with governments to deliver that. We have to develop a professional environment. That's absolutely critical, and that's something that we're very focused on. What we do for the Socceroos, we need to transition that over to the Matildas. We need more players focused full-time on football. They need to be playing competitive games. They all need to be in competitive environments, and they need to be focused full-time on football. We need underpinning talent programs. A lot of people will come into this space and play a role in this space in this room. So that's about how we identify potential girls in each state, how we support those girls, how we support them then when they get to the junior national team level, and then through to the Matildas. And one of the key things for girls as well is the opportunity to our most talented girls to play with boys. This is really important. If you speak to all the Matildas now, they all played with boys probably up to the age of 14. And so that's something that is really important. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but we need to be a bit more open-minded when we think about what is the best environment for certain talented players in each state, and make sure that they're being challenged and they're in a competitive environment. And we need to increase our depth. So we have 100,000 players nationally. Break that down to each age group, break that down to each region, break that down to different motivations of some girls that just want to play versus some girls that actually want to reach their potential. You know, the pool gets fairly small, so we still need to be really focused on increasing our depth. And finally, you know, FFA certainly, which we might get accused of this sometimes, didn't just put our finger up and go, let's bid for a Women's World Cup. This was part of a broader strategy. You've just heard about a lot of the things that we'd like to achieve. We really feel like hosting a Women's World Cup in Australia can help us to fast track those objectives and become a leading organisation for females. And it's important that we get government support and discussions, particularly around legacy, around facilities. It's the most prestigious and largest women's sporting event internationally. It will be twice the size of the Asian Cup, and if you think about what the Asian Cup did in terms of the interest around the game and demonstrating football's real kind of multicultural connection to all parts of Asia. So the Women's World Cup is bigger. Over in Canada, they had doubled the broadcast, double the attendance, and personally having attended Canada, I think we can take it to the next level. So this is a real opportunity for football, not just to grow women's football, but to grow football more broadly. It's an opportunity to play a role within women's sport and demonstrate that you can actually have real commercial targets around an event, and women's sport can deliver commercial outcomes. That is really important, and a Women's World Cup would do that. It has the opportunity to have a wide-ranging legacy in terms of participation. It certainly would help us to get to 50-50. It would help us to unlock more interest in the game. It would provide a legacy for the W League. And wouldn't it be fantastic to see our Matildas lift a World Cup on home soil? That's something I'd love to see. And I'm sure that if we gave them that opportunity, knowing the Matildas like I know them, I'm sure they would actually deliver, because they deliver every time we give them that support. And key for us in terms of the bid also is increasing the number of female coaches, administrators and referees. It's not just about what happens on the pitch, it's also about football's objectives off the pitch. If we're going to be a leading organisation for females, we need to see females at all levels of the game. We need to have more female board members, we need to have more female executives, we need to have more female coaches, we need a broader balance. We need to start out on a journey of really changing the face of football, and that's when we will achieve true equality, and we really think that hosting a Women's World Cup can help us to achieve that. That was it from me. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Emma. We do have maybe a 10-15 minute window now for some questions if anyone has any. We do have 2 roving microphones, so if you raise your hand, we'll bring a mic to you. And Emma, perhaps I'll get the ball rolling. I have a daughter, of course, involved in grassroots football, and it just seems that the windows between Matildas games are so long, and as you say, the W League season is short. Can you perhaps briefly tell us what's in store for the Matildas? What are we looking at for the next 12 months, and how are we going to keep that momentum going?
Sure. I mean, I think that what we'll observe over the next week around hosting China here in Victoria is something that we need to replicate on an annual basis, and we'd really love to have an ongoing partnership with the Victorian government where we host an annual tournament here in Victoria where we can engage with perhaps broader Asian teams and communities, but make it an annual event so that females, everyone in the game actually knows that's when the Matildas are playing. And that's something that we're focused on. We'd like to talk to different governments about that. We'd love Victoria to be the state that actually helps to bring that to life.
Any of you got any questions? We've got one in the middle of the room here. Sorry, it's a race to see which one gets to you first. Right down the centre aisle. Yeah. Sorry, it's coming. Thank you. Better be good, the suspense.
Hi everyone, my name is Pawashi, and my I've heard you, Emma, how you've been talking about the changes that FFV is making and stuff, which is a great for women and stuff. But in the southeast, because I have been playing soccer for many years, and I've played for international level in Zimbabwe, but not in Australia. So, and I've played for FIFA. Thanks. And I have coached at Oakley and also at Berwick. But when you as a mom, when you go on maternity leave, it's going to be hard for you to get back into a club because there's not much opportunities for women to go and coach there. You know, every time when you go, they just look, oh, you know what, she has a kid and stuff. So, and I don't see that many opportunities for women to get into coaching. And I'd love to hear about what you guys are doing to get that because, you know, in Southeast, there isn't much clubs there for ladies to go to and start playing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Increasing the number of female coaches and the opportunities, but also creating the right environments for female coaches to thrive is really important. I don't think we're there yet nationally. I think we've got a lot of work to do. What we've started to do nationally, because I think this is really important, that when you're trying to kind of affect change, that you start in your own backyard. So we've had issues even nationally having female coaches coaching, you know, our national teams. So we've set up a mentoring program nationally, which is focused on supporting coaches. And Ray actually was part of that program, who's here with us today. As part of that, it was actually not just supporting females, but identifying potential females so that we're aware of the talent that existed, and then ensuring that we supported individuals to, I suppose, achieve their potential in a coaching sense. Trickle that down, that's something that actually we would like to do with Victoria in particular, is actually what can we do to support females, but also how can we change the culture within clubs so that those opportunities exist, and when you turn up to a club, that you're supported within that environment. It is important that girls can see role models and can be connected to females. So I feel like we've had a focus on getting girls playing, but I do think that as a sport, we do need to be focused on also providing those coaching opportunities. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. I don't think it will be one initiative. I think we have to work with each federation to find out what the opportunities are. But in the first instance, we just need greater visibility of female coaches. Even if you look at the W League at the moment, you know, there's not a lot of females coaching within our W League. Then I suppose if you go down to the women's NPLs in each league, how many female coaches are there? So we need to start to make sure that we are being proactive in, you know, developing initiatives to get more females into those roles, but also supporting females as part of that as well.
Howdy, Emma. I'm sure you'd be disappointed if I didn't ask you something.
Sure, Maria.
I'm Maria Berry. And I'm the chair of the Women's Standing Committee in Victoria. We should all just be basking in the fact that the game is going so well at the moment. So let me go to something that I'd like you to talk about a little more, where I think we're not up to speed, and I think it's a really important area, and that relates to fan engagement and the live experience at W League. You knew I was going to say W League. I've just come back from the United States where I treated myself to the National Women's Soccer League experience at Portland Thorns and at Orlando Pride. How do we make sure we've got 10 Portland Thorns in Australia? I mean, that's the gold standard.
Yeah, I agree.
That's the diamond standard, and we are so far off the pace. And since we're going so well everywhere else, what can we do?
I think that's a great question. We actually had Portland Thorns come over to talk to us about what they're doing with our W League teams about a year ago. And it's not just about what you see in terms of fan engagement, it's about the whole approach of that club. That club it's one club, they treat the men's the same as the women. And I don't just mean in terms of the support, I mean as in the commercial objectives that they set. They make a lot of money out of merchandise for the women's side of the game. They have very strong targets around the fans. Everyone within those clubs has KPIs to drive outcomes for both the men's team and the women's team. So the first thing I'd say is it It starts internally. And as a result of that, they've also been very focused on making sure that the fan experience is fantastic. And I think the US would love to bottle what happens in Portland Thorns and take that in other areas as well. But it comes back to something that I was saying earlier. We have to get past the point where we're just saying, we just have a game, tick. It has to be about the broader objectives that we're trying to achieve. So we have to be focused on getting more fans to the W League, and therefore we have to think about how can we engage fans when they're there. And I think that we're not quite there yet. I think there's a lot of work to do where we actually start to think about that. And I think this might be one of the questions Steph was going to ask me, but one of the things that I'm really passionate about is that you actually put a value on women's sport. I don't like the idea of just throwing the doors open for free. I think you have to set a value. We did that years ago. It worked for a while, but it's not sustainable. People don't then value it the same as they value men's sport. So that's really important. And we have to get our A-League and W League clubs in a space where they actually see, the commercial benefits for the W League. But I don't think it's an overnight fix, and I think we've certainly come a long way. What I will say is I think that the double headers have worked in some areas quite well, and that provides the opportunity to connect the men's team with the women's team and connect with a broader fan base. I'd also say that, interestingly, the W League and the A-League are kind of intrinsically linked, and I think match day and fan experience is not something that we've actually nailed within the A-League yet either. So I think there is a massive opportunity across both the A-League and the W League to start to do that. And as I said, it's not just about what happens on the pitch, it's actually about thinking about the whole package, respecting the product, respecting the football, but thinking about how you can actually engage fans more broadly.
Question over here. Just before you ask your question, if anyone's not familiar with the Portland Thorns story, there is a New York Times article online, and it's called A Blueprint for Women's Sports Success, but Can It Be Copied? Very interesting read if you get time on the lunch break.
Hi, thanks Emma. It was a really informative presentation. My name's Jill Murphy. I'm the coach of the women's street soccer program for the Big Issue. And it's really great to hear there's just so much going on, and often at the grassroots level you kind of feel those frustrations. So coming along today has been fantastic. I'm interested in what ideas you have for promoting more women to play football. I feel very passionately about providing those opportunities for women who've never played a team sport. And certainly the women I work with who come from a disadvantaged background have never experienced that, and they get so much out of it. And I think it's different for encouraging girls to encouraging women. And
I agree.
I'm just interested in what I know you've I guess about the barriers and what ideas you've got in that space.
No, I think that's a great question, and I actually was involved in coaching the street soccer women's team years ago when I first moved to Melbourne, so I'm very passionate about that space, and it was probably one of the best experiences of my life. I think the important thing is it's about not thinking about creating the traditional approach to the game. So it's just about providing opportunities for people to play. In football, we often get hung up on how many players, what's the size of the pitch, and create these all these structures. Whereas I think if you want to get more women involved, we have to break down some of those barriers. So it's about providing 4-a-side, 5-a-side, 7-a-side. It's about being more social. It's about not necessarily being focused on the football, but probably being focused on, enabling women to connect. Certainly my experience with the street soccer program, it wasn't about the football. It was actually about giving women a safe space that they could connect with each other and make friends on a weekly basis, and the football was just something that happened around them. That would be maybe slightly different to the way that we would approach engaging with the male street soccer team at the time, because it was all about the football. So I think it's important that coaches, instructors, facilitators, whatever you want to call people that are involved in trying to get more people into the game, are not just focused on football. They're actually thinking about, the broader reasons that people might want to engage with our game. So I don't necessarily think the answer there is through traditional club structures. I think it's about thinking about partnerships with different organisations that might bring a different expertise to the game, and really being a little bit more flexible. It's really tough because governing bodies are set up with membership fees and structures and competitions and teams, and it was the same in England as well. And what's starting to happen in England is the less structured stuff is taking place outside of the governing body in partnership with others. So I think that there's an opportunity in Victoria to think about partnering with different organisations and being less stringent. But I think, being less focused on throwing the football first. It's actually about providing opportunities for women to connect, and football is just one part of that.
Emma, you've got about 30 seconds left. Just before you leave the stage, could you just give us your thoughts very quickly on AFLW? I wasn't alone in watching the rollout thinking, hang on, we've been doing this for years. Why is there so much hype around this? Friend or foe?
I think it's fantastic. Look, I mean, personally, I'm from England. I don't understand AFL, I've got to be honest. I'm one of those people that says, why is there so many goals? And everyone's saying there's not enough goals in football. So I'm on that side of the equation. But I think, look, my observations is that they did a really good job. They had a fantastic PR machine. They had a fantastic marketing campaign. I think they really demonstrated to other sports, what you can do to get attention around a league. For me, we can't get scared by that. We have to stick to our strategy. We have to continue to grow the base and get more girls playing. We need to continue to ensure that we invest in our W League. And we have the international side in the Matildas and the pathways that creates. So I think that what it did, though, was focus every sport on what they need to do around the women's game. And personally, I don't think that's a bad thing.
Indeed, well said. Ladies and gents, Emma Highwood, thank you very much.